Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Steve Jagger. I graduated from Vancouver College in 1996, and I'm currently the co-president of the Alumni Association with Mark Reed. The VC Alumni Association is a member-driven organization aimed at bringing all alumni together. We run annual events, the golf tournament, the Irish Christmas lunch, the fishing derby, there's a hockey game, basketball, and quite a few more. But the COVID-19 situation changed everything. We've either canceled or postponed every activity that we do. And so we decided to set up a webinar series to engage with alumni around the world. This is our third webinar, which is great. The idea is we're charging, you guys all know, charging a small $10 fee. What we're doing is we're taking all that money that comes in. We're using 100% of that money to buy gift certificates from Vancouver College alumni-owned restaurants. And then as the Alumni Association, we're holding on to those gift certificates, and we'll use them next year as prizes at the golf tournament or whatever for next year. But the idea was to get some cash in the hands of the alumni restaurants. Tonight is supporting Little Bird, which is a dim sum place. And actually the Irish Heather, who turns out is not a Vancouver College alumni, and that was my mistake. But I told him, well, we're going ahead with it anyway, so he's on.
Ironically, Sean's a good fella, so that's a good move anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if somebody told me he was alumni, but anyways, after I told him what was going on and he got all excited about it, he's like, thank you. Turns out he's not an alumni, so instead of taking it away from him, I figured let's keep moving and include him in it. So yeah, Little Bird and the Irish Heather. So before I introduce our guests, let me give you a couple items. The Zoom room has everybody muted. You can't unmute yourself for good reason. Throw your questions into the chat, and we will get to them as part of it at the end. So just ask your questions in there. And let me do quick intros here. So we've got Martin Ertl is a grad of '88. He's an entrepreneur. He started a company called Contractually to move business contracts to the cloud, and he sold that company to Coupa Software. He happens to be a lawyer by background, and he's starting a new company to automate business contracts with machine learning. Martin is going to be facilitating our interview here with Mike Parker. So Mike is a grad of '89. He's the global president of iCrossing, which helps some of the world's leading brands to drive transformation and growth in an era of empowered consumers. Under his leadership, iCrossing has continued to thrive as one of the world's leading digital agencies. Mike joined iCrossing in 2015 to oversee its West Coast and US territories before taking the helm of global operations in 2017, which was a banner year for the agency, in which it earned the top spotted advertising agency to watch. Prior to iCrossing, he was the global chief digital officer at McCain World Group, also served as the co-president of Tribal DDB US Network. Mike's been recognized by Campaign Magazine as 40 under 40 leader of digital marketing and has won Agency of the Year honors and served as a member of the inaugural Cannes Lion Innovation Jury. So with that said, thank you both for doing this, and I will pass this over to Martin.
Thanks, Steve, and welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here and have the chance to talk with you, Mike. It seems like there's an awful lot of stuff going on in the world right now, so we're probably not going to run out of things to talk about. A couple of things. Why don't we start at the beginning? Why Vancouver College? Why did you go to VC?
Just going back to Steve's point, though, I was just thinking about it. Sean Heather, who owns the Irish Heather, did not go to VC, but his wife went to LFA, so close enough. Aaron went to LFA, actually, now that I think about it. Why did I go to Vancouver College? Well, a big reason was my father, who went also to Vancouver College, who may actually be on the Zoom today joining us. But yeah, my dad graduated from VC, and I knew about the school, and kind of was actually, I know many people in our era kind of felt like their parents forced them to go, but I certainly didn't feel like that. I kind of chose to go. Yeah.
So when did you start feeling once you're there, like, okay, this is the place for me? What got you excited about being at VC?
I made the move in in grade 7, and joined. So it was smaller, right? The class sizes at that point are smaller. So I felt like I got connected to to the community and connected to the school and the people very quickly. I think maybe when you go to a school in 8th grade, and it's, bigger group of people all making the transition, maybe it takes you a little longer to get connected, but I felt like I got connected very quickly. A couple of people that I knew kind of going in, and certainly at the time, fair amount of the people in grade 7 have been at college through all of elementary school. So there was, I think, as much as I felt like I got connected quickly, there's certainly a little bit of a barrier breaking into the existing group of people as well. But I think that tees you up well for high school. So I kind of hit the ground running in high school, so to speak, and was able to get involved in a lot of different aspects of the school, which I think was an important part of it for me as well.
When you look back at the things you got involved in, what most stands out for you as your passion at the time?
I was pretty active. I did student council. I was grad committee chairman our year. Tried a number of different sports. I was on the yearbook committee doing ad sales and stuff, which was, good teaser for the things to come. But I think the thing that stands out most for me was probably my rowing experience. We were talking about that earlier, but I was fortunate enough to, I guess I was sort of at a moment of, I wasn't a great football player. I wasn't a great basketball player. I wasn't somebody who got involved in one of those sports early. And so, later on in your high school time, it's hard to jump on those trains if you haven't been on them from the beginning, because you're just not at that same level that everybody else is at. And thinking about what to do and how to get involved. And Terry Shea had the idea to kind of do a little test drive of the idea of rowing. And I just took to it really quickly and was fortunate enough to be part of the very first rowing crew. College, we were the inaugural year for rowing. It's a fantastic experience. And I know, as we talked about before, that rowing has become a really important pillar of what college excels at and has. But at the time we actually had no boats, and we were borrowing, other schools' boats and, trying to make do. So it was kind of a crazy year, but it was great.
You got in on the ground floor of rowing. You were the original startup.
That's
How
right.
many years did you row then at VC?
So the program started when I was in grade 11, and really I only kind of got the one full year in. So I guess I would say I rowed at VC for a year and a half. And I actually got a little bit recruited. We had a really, despite the limited amount of time, we had a really successful year as our first year. And I got recruited. I got a little bit recruited by University of Washington, but ended up going to UBC and rowing varsity crew for a year at UBC as well.
Fantastic. Let's come back to that. Is there a memory or some memories that stand out for you from high school? Your funniest recollection?
A lot of my memories I don't think are fit for repeating here amongst this group of people, but I had to, yeah, exactly. I don't want it to interfere with my political aspirations. I had great experiences, both at the school and just with friends. I think one of the great things for me about VC was just hanging out with a group of people that were from all over the Lower Mainland, and having a passion for skiing. And my family had a cabin at Whistler at the time, and being able to go up there with some of the guys and ski and shenanigans and stuff. Lots of good memories.
When you then went on to UBC, how did you make that decision coming out of high school about where to go, especially having other options and looking at what you wanted to do with rowing?
Yeah, I think that if I'm honest, I probably didn't go through an extensive process of really thinking about where to go to university or college, compared to maybe what other people did, or certainly what I think young people do today. My daughter is just turned 17. She's just completed grade 11. So she's going into grade 12 next year, and she's starting to obviously think about college here in the US. And it's such a process of applying and thinking about what the right fit is for you. And maybe some people on the call went through more of that themselves. But UBC was just kind of always the almost default option for me, if I'm honest. And I had aspirations to go and do business, do commerce, and certainly that was a strength. You know, my dad went to UBC and other family members there, and friends were going there, and you know, they had a solid rowing program. I looked at University of Washington, but the idea of sort of moving away and really going to college in the States and getting into crew full bore was just not something that in the end you know, decided I wanted to do. So it was kind of always the kind of obvious, you know, kind of de facto choice for me, really.
And at this point, how much are you thinking about what you want to do after university? Because I know from talking to students in high school, even in university, that's something that they think a lot about, but would love to hear to what extent and how you were thinking about that coming out of high school and going through university.
It's a great question. I think for me, I knew what I liked in terms of academically, and generally from a career pursuit perspective. I knew that I was interested in business. I knew something about marketing and advertising arena. I guess I thought less about kind of what job am I trying to apply for, and therefore what college or university do I need to get that job. I thought more about, what do I want to study? What do I want to focus on? What is going to open up the kinds of doors for me that I was interested, I thought, in having opened. So I sort of focused a little bit more on the, you know, step-by-step versus kind of projecting a long way ahead. I know that, again, thinking about my daughter's experience and students today, Martin, I think that as you refer, there's a lot of pressure. There just seems to be a ton of pressure to really have it all figured out, very young. Where you want to go to school, what you want to study, what kind of job you want to have, where you want to live, because they force you to make these decisions in terms of application for school or thinking about what kind of major you want to do and stuff. So young, but I think that, you know, my advice to my daughter and my advice to any student today would be the same, which is, you know, don't try to push back on that pressure a little bit and try to feel less like you have to have it all figured out when you're 17 years old. And I think more about the kind of place you want to be, the kind of, you know, interactions you want to have, the types of things you want to study, that you're going to be passionate about, and have some confidence and some faith that those doors will open for you as the journey goes, maybe.
I think that's really valuable advice, and thanks for sharing that. So let's fast forward a little bit. You've gone through university. You studied commerce at UBC. What happens next?
Yeah, as I was sort of moving through my commerce studies before graduating, the summer before I graduated, I was looking for a job, and I found an opportunity to do a summer internship in the airline industry at Cathay Pacific Airways. And at that time, you know, obviously the population and the interaction between Hong Kong and Vancouver was exploding, and Cathay was on the forefront of, you know, travel between Canada and Asia. So I thought it was an exciting kind of internship and type of business to get involved with. So I did a summer internship at Cathay, and I really enjoyed it. And then during my final year at UBC, I continued to work sort of part-time and stayed connected to Cathay. And then they offered me a full-time job after I graduated. So I started in the airline business and working for Cathay, and really enjoyed that. It was a time that Cathay opened up the Vancouver to New York connection as well. So I got to go to New York on business, which was pretty cool. And you know, fast forward, I sort of realized though that the challenge in an airline is, you know, everything happens at the central hub. And when you're in what's called an outport, you know, someplace that the airline flies to, and there's a small marketing office or you know, sales administration office, you're kind of on the backwater, like you're kind of disconnected from the decisions and what's happening. And I realized that if I wanted to kind of maximize my experience with Cathay, that I needed to get connected to HQ. So I sort of enacted this operation where anytime senior executives from Cathay would come out from Hong Kong and spend time in Vancouver, I would make sure that I was front and center having a beer or joining the dinner or bending their ear to sort of say, hey, I'd be interested in an opportunity. And so eventually one presented itself, and I had an opportunity to move to Hong Kong for 2 years and live there and work in the marketing department. And that was sort of in the frequent flyer program, customer loyalty, early what we would call CRM now, and very, very early digital marketing. So I had an incredible experience living in Hong Kong for 2 years and traveling extensively on business for the airline, and really focused on our frequent flyer program partnerships and some of the joint marketing that we were doing. So that was just like a really formative and interesting experience for me. And I was in Hong Kong in 95, 96, which is obviously a cool time leading up to the handover time of change there. Traveled around Asia a lot, both for business and personal, and kind of got a flavor for that. But I was doing long distance. I was in a relationship with my now wife, and sort of got to a point where it was like, hey, am I coming back or not, or what are we doing? So I eventually moved back, and I spent a little bit more time in the airline business at Cathay, but I kind of realized that maybe it was time to get a different experience and try a different industry. And I'd always been a little bit fascinated by the advertising industry world, the advertising agency world, and had some connections there. And so I thought, what a great way to go work in the agency world for a period of time where I would get to work on a variety of different businesses and across a variety of different industries. And after sort of spending 5 years in total in the airline business and kind of getting to know it a bit, have a chance to kind of broaden my horizons. So I did that. I joined an agency in Vancouver called Jarvis, which was a somewhat world-renowned creative agency in Vancouver. And, an incredible journey of 10 years at Jarvis. We were acquired by Omnicom Global Holding Company, an agency called DDB. We became Jarvis DDB and then DDB Canada. And as I said, I spent 10 years in that journey. And one of the highlights of that was it was kind of the early days of digital marketing, where some of the technology, teleco companies, different businesses like that were starting early days of building websites and investing in online advertising, certainly long before Google or social media. And because I had a little bit more of a connection and a passion to that, I eventually got asked by Frank Palmer, who was the head of the agency, to take on responsibility for our digital agency offering. That consolidated up with all of DDB's digital holdings to become Tribal DDB, which was one of the first kind of global digital agency companies. So I ran Tribal Canada for 5 or 6 years, and again, early on the wave of kind of digital marketing. I was pretty young at the time. I was probably 26, 27 when I sort of first got some of the leadership opportunity, and I think I did that for maybe 5 years, led Tribal Canada and grew it nationally. And we won Digital Agency of the Year in Canada, got some notice and some recognition. And lo and behold, I got a call one day from a recruiter that said, how do you think about maybe moving to San Francisco? And at the time, my wife Megan and I, and we had young kids and pretty set up, honestly, in Vancouver. Access to Whistler, place on the islands and the coast, and lots of friends, community. And we hadn't really thought, honestly, about leaving Vancouver. And when the opportunity came in, it was with a very well-known, somewhat renowned agency here called Gidby Silverstein. And it just felt like a really unique opportunity, to sort of trade on some of that experience and success growing the business in Canada, come to the big leagues a little bit, work for a globally known agency in a market like San Francisco, get more connected to Silicon Valley and all of the things that at the time were really starting to take off. And to be honest, we really, sort of struggled with that decision for a while. Like, should we really leave? Is this an adventure that we have to take advantage of? And in the end, we decided it was that, Vancouver would always be there. Our friends would be there, but we wanted to see what kind of an adventure we could have and move down here. I think if it had been New York, honestly, or if it had been other markets, I might have been less interested. But always loved kind of the West Coast cities. California, San Francisco is a great city. And again, the proximity to everything happening in the Valley here, it just seemed like a really interesting, in the same way, kind of like being in Hong Kong during the, sort of handover was an interesting moment. It was like, maybe this is an interesting moment to be in a place like this. And I think, as much as I love Vancouver, and I always look almost jealously on people who live in Vancouver and are able to enjoy the quality of life that we have there, and are able to kind of find a career opportunity that provides a bigger platform or access to, global opportunity. For me, in the kind of marketing and advertising arena, with a sort of limit to head offices and sort of marketing spend, I did kind of worry that I was kind of capping out a little bit in terms of what my career might potentially become if I stayed in a place like Vancouver. So I made the tough decision to come down here with my family, and that was 13 years ago.
Wow. What a history. That's a great point about, searching for opportunity, right? So the thread that you've described so far, you sought out opportunity in Hong Kong at a pretty significant time in its history, and now moving to the Bay Area at a hugely expansive time in what the Bay Area has done with the web and with technology. Now, did you have kids at the time when you moved down to the Bay Area?
Yeah, they were pretty small. They were 1 and 3 at the time that we moved down here. So it was kind of like, if we don't go now, it's going to get harder to go as kids get plugged into sports and schools and community. We felt like we were mobile at the time. So my kids were born in Canada. My mom grew up in Seattle. My dad was obviously born and raised in Vancouver. And so I was born a dual citizen. I was lucky because my mom's had US citizenship. So I was born dual. And because I was dual and kids were born in Canada, they have Canadian citizenship. And then when we moved down, they got their US passports as well. So my kids are dual. And so it made it easier, because of that. And the kids being at a young age. So they were kind of movable. They're very much connected to Canada. They know that, in our hearts we're Canadian, but they don't remember it a lot. They were so small. Obviously,
got a July 1st and a July 4th. That's great.
That's right. And we get 2 turkeys every year as well, or 3 some years.
So you get to the Bay Area. What did you find when you got there? How did it compare to what your expectations were coming in, life-wise and professionally and culture?
Yeah, I mean, it really was a bit of a shock. It was definitely a change. I think, as I obviously go home to Vancouver and spend time, everything has changed. Everything continues to change. Vancouver has gotten bigger and more global and more competitive in many respects. But at the time, it just felt so much bigger. It felt more intense. So many people in one area, so much competition for space on the highway, competition for, access to a weekend getaway or a kids program. So it was much more competitive. And I think that that sort of American spirit of kind of competitiveness and forging your own way, I think took adjustment. It took us some time to adjust to the pace and adjust to that kind of in your face every day. Every day is a little bit of a battle, and things have been felt very easy in Vancouver in comparison. But I think also just the excitement of the scale of opportunity and this idea at the time, especially here, that people were forging new paths and really kind of inventing search, inventing social media, inventing Facebook and Apple, and just all of the things that were happening. There was just this real interesting spirit. And, the neighborhood that we moved in here is kind of halfway between the city and the valley. And so my neighbors are a combination of people that work in technology, work in finance and other different things. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but, just having a block party or something, and people are at Facebook and Google and Apple and Yahoo and doing interesting stuff. It kind of creates an interesting energy. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed in my job, being able to get connected to those kind of companies and be somebody who could be seen by clients as bringing insight and knowledge about what's happening at a time when a lot of businesses were still very new to digital, to the internet. And it really helped me kind of honestly accelerate my career being here at that time and kind of being able to bring that sort of learning and connection forward in my business relationships.
As a Canadian in the Bay Area, what's the impact of how others see you? Do you feel that people see you differently, or it's a non-issue?
A bit of both. I mean, I remember when I first moved down, and it was early on, and I was working a lot we had won the Sprint telecom business, and they're based in outside of Kansas City in a place called Overland Park, and was going out there a lot. And my mom called me one evening, and she was like, what's it feel like to be in the States? What's it like to be in America? And I said, at home in San Francisco, doesn't actually feel like, you're in America all that different, but here in Kansas and Overland Park, it really does. And so I think, one of the reasons why the Bay Area was attractive to us is that it is so similar, it feels culturally compatible and aligned. And I don't think it's wildly different, up and down the coast here in terms of how we think about things and how we approach life. So I think it's similar in that respect. There are a ton of Canadians here in the Bay Area.
I was going to say, I think it's the largest Canadian expat community anywhere in the world.
Yeah. There are substantial amounts of Canadians and people in interesting roles and interesting companies doing interesting stuff. So I don't feel like that much of an anomaly. I'm not that unique running around being Canadian. When you go to the Sharks Canucks games, there's an awful lot of Canucks jerseys, including myself, representing here. So I think it hasn't been, I don't feel like I stand out. I think these days, a lot of my friends and neighbors are jealous because they talk wantingly about escaping America and moving to Canada. And I always make the point that I actually can do that. And at any point if we wanted to do that. But, I think I see Aidan Sullivan on the line, and Aidan knows I've been able to get connected and networked with other Canadians here. And there's a really interesting group that started some years back called C100, and it's sort of a networking organization for Canadians in Silicon Valley and working in technology. And there were a group of guys, predominantly venture capitalists and people working in sort of in finance and investment that were sort of realizing that other countries, that other regional groups had more network that they would really leverage to get connected and support each other and share information, and that there was this opportunity as Canadians where there, especially given there was so much interesting development companies like yours, Martin, that are starting and offering really interesting investment opportunities and new technologies and new innovations. And this idea, like, could we help ourselves as a community get connected to other Canadians, but also could we have a mission of helping Canadian business and connect the Valley back to Canada? So that's been a really interesting journey to be part of that and have moments of opportunity where you're really around other Canadians, but helping each other out, getting network, but also always thinking about how do we help businesses back in Canada get on the radar for investment, for learning, for resources, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's. I think we're at a point in time where it's possible to take advantage of opportunities globally, and certainly from a Canadian standpoint, take advantage of opportunities in the U.S. in a way that wasn't possible a generation ago. And C100, I think, is one of the big parts of supporting that for Canadians and for Canadians especially. Shifting gears a little bit, we're all on Zoom right now. We're all on Zoom right now, not just for this webinar, but many of us are on Zoom all the time, every day.
All day long, right?
What's the last 2 months been like for you and for your company as you've had to adapt to COVID-19 and the changes that that's brought?
It's been a strange and wonderful time for the last few months. Being here in California, we were one of the states that moved probably fastest and most aggressively in terms of policy and what we call shelter in place. We've been more restrictive than I know it has been in BC. I think BC has fared very well through the process and has had very good leadership, but I think is not had the same kind of strictness to rules and regulation that we implemented here. So I can recall very, very clearly, 3 months ago, being in New York for a series of meetings and when it was all kind of really closing down, and sitting with some of my colleagues in our New York office and our HQ, and sort of saying, I don't know when we're gonna sort of see each other again, but off we go, and flew back. That was my last flight, and worked very hard, very rapidly to pivot our business to be 100% virtual. I'm very fortunate that, we are in an information-driven business that was actually easier to pivot to become virtual. We don't have a lot of need for people to be on location. I think some of the challenge of not having people together and as connected for strategizing and creativity and things, I think we miss a little bit of that. But for the most part, we shifted very rapidly. I mean, we were a business that used virtual tools and conference calls and Zooms, and people could work from home. Everybody had a laptop and Wi-Fi and all that kind of basics. And so it wasn't that hard to keep the business going and shift. I think our clients, obviously, as this all unfolded, we work across a really wide range of clients and industries, and everybody's business has been impacted differently. We've got clients like food service, like craft, where people stocked up right away, and everybody's been cooking at home more. So sales are up. We've got a client that's an e-commerce retailer in the beauty and skincare space. It's like going absolutely crazy and are benefiting from this moment. But other clients like Toyota or Bridgestone, where auto sales, ground to a halt. Nobody wants to go to a car dealership. And the NBA is a client of ours. We do media planning and buying for the NBA out of our New York office. And, they just called up one day and said, we're going to shut the season down. So we're going to turn it all off. So I think our clients have been all over the place. So how we've had to help them adapt and respond, how we've helped them try to understand what is happening in the consumer landscape. But our business has had to adapt rapidly. It's probably, if I'm honest, been more challenge for us to try to help adapt to our clients' realities than it has been, to just kind of adapting our business. But, for me personally, it's been very challenging. I've had to, flex new leadership muscles in terms of how do I keep the team connected, and how do we stay connected to our customers and clients? How do I make sure that all of our people feel connected and supported at home? So I'm sure, like many of you guys, we're doing a lot more town halls and team stand-ups and trying to stay connected that way. So that's been a really interesting leadership challenge for me. Obviously not something that we've gone through before. And I've also, like, for me, I was always taught in this job to be very connected to people and to be out there sort of walking the floor. And for me, that's meant traveling around to our offices and staying connected to our teams, but also being out with our clients and pitching new prospects. So I'm on a plane historically all the time. And, to be honest with you, I was really kind of burning out of that, and been doing that for a long period of time, just kind of, putting one foot in the front of the other and doing it. But to wake up one day and say, look, I'm going to be at home working from, this home office, and have dinner with my family and see how their, days were at school, and walk my dog and try to get a little fitness in. And it's been a really interesting and positive, beneficial experience for me, that, to kind of be forced to take this moment of not traveling and take that kind of a break.
Yeah, I think that's been the case for a lot of folks, that obviously despite the huge negative impacts of COVID-19, there's some silver linings, and one of those is the opportunity to spend more time at home with family in a way that was pretty challenging before. Tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing from your clients, and how you and your clients are thinking together about what the future looks like here post-COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because clearly we have been on a steady march toward greater interaction in the digital world, right, for many years now. And e-commerce is not a new concept. Social media is not a new concept, and businesses, our business has been helping businesses adapt and transform to that reality. Many clients, thinking about what that was going to look like and how that continued march was going to progress over time, and how important e-commerce was today and how important it was going to be in 1, 3, 5 years, and this kind of plan of adaptation and transformation over time. And I think what we've seen in 3 months is sort of almost like a 4 or 5 year acceleration of that curve. And businesses who were already very digitally centric and who were very prepared for that, have been able to thrive in this moment. For other businesses who have been further behind in that sort of transformation timeframe or plan, I think it's really hurt them, right? And if you haven't been set up to be able to engage customers digitally or drive sales and transact digitally, it's been tough, I think. And so a lot of clients and marketers and businesses are scrambling to sort of say, how do we ramp up that investment? How do we pull that time frame forward? How do we adapt to those new realities? I mean, our data says total digital time spent is up 38% for most people right now. So we're spending that much more time in the digital world, right? So if you're a marketer, how are you thinking about your investments to try to reach consumers in those channels that they're spending so much time in? But also, like, how do you tell the story of your brand and product? How do you make an emotional connection? How do you build trust and engagement with your brand and your product when you're having a much more exclusively or digitally centric kind of engagement? And I think one of the things that's been fascinating, Martin, is like in the last few years, there's been this rise of direct to consumer brands, of these more nimble business models where, in the past, if you wanted to start a new clothing line, like, it was nearly impossible because you'd have to get retail distribution partners and you'd have to scale, your production, and you'd have to be able to afford television advertising and all these things. And you fast forward to today where, the mattress guys and the clothing guys and all beauty products, a wide range of companies have started up with much lower kind of total cost to be able to do that. And, they've said, look, we're going to invest in data, and we're going to really begin by understanding the customer and finding who this customer is and be able to connect with them, and created this like very digitally centric, much more nimble playbook. And I think a lot of those businesses right now are thriving, and we're sort of learning, how do you take some of those learnings and how do you take those lessons in that new playbook and help apply it to maybe some bigger and more known brands as well?
Just picking up on your point about changing consumer behavior, are you seeing in the data, beyond obviously the fact that consumers are spending, I think you mentioned 38% more time online, are you seeing other shifts in behavior from that extra time being spent online from the impact of COVID-19?
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, I think some of this stuff is to be expected a little bit. I think a lot of shopping behavior, if you can't go to retail right now and get products that you need, people are shopping. And it's funny because I sort of think of it as a spectrum. Like, there's people like my dad probably who have miraculously discovered Amazon in the last couple of months. Oh my God, you can order all this stuff online. Others of us who are, probably further along, but still like other barriers of perception, like things that I maybe wasn't as confident doing online or wasn't as used to doing online. I was talking to some of my colleagues the other day about, grocery shopping and especially fresh products. Like, oh, I'll order all my cleaning supplies on Amazon, but I can't order my tomatoes online because, they might not be ripe or whatever. But then lo and behold, you have to order grocery online, and it comes, and the product, produce is great and seamless process. And you're like, oh, actually I can do this, or Telemedicine, I think, is a really interesting one that has really interesting implications. What is it like to have a doctor's visit on Zoom and outside of, actually being able to like poke and prod you as if needed, can we do certain things? Are consumers confident? Are people confident about certain types of behaviors online that they maybe haven't before? Clothes, I got to try that on before I buy it, whatever. But, people are breaking through those kinds of barriers. So I think
it's
what
almost
we think
forced more experimentation in a way that wouldn't have happened without this experience.
Yeah, and then having broken through that barrier and established confidence, I think those behaviors, have lasting implications.
Just being mindful of time here, I know we want to keep enough time to open it up to broader questions. Maybe one last topic before we do that. When you look at social media and how that's evolved, how do you look at the challenges and from your perspective in helping your clients, and also as an individual person, how do you look at the challenges that social media companies and sites like Facebook and Twitter and TikTok have when it comes to obviously enabling everyone to be able to speak and to share what they want to share, and at the same time the challenges that come along with that some of what they may be sharing may be outright offensive to some people. It may be misinformation. How do you look at that? What are you seeing?
It's an excellent question. I mean, I think we will look back in the future, and a lot of sociologists will do a lot of analysis of the good and the bad impacts of the rise of social media in this era that we're living through. The opportunity to connect people up, enable people to stay connected to each other in a way that has been hard historically, I think has got lots of positives. I think that, for me, I think about a number of implications, right? I really worry about the divisiveness and the polarization that's happening, particularly in the US, but globally, certainly. And I think the challenge is that social media, as you said, Martin, gives everyone a voice, and there's no ability to impart or understand the authority of that voice or the expertise of that voice. All voices are voices, for good and for bad. And I think, we have proven to really have a tendency to connect with people who think like we do and look like we do. And so there's this self-reinforcing behavior. And I think it's been really harmful for the politics of the country. And I worry about it going forward, because how you feel is reinforced and validated by the other people around you that apparently feel the same. And it's become harder and harder to get disparate opinions or be challenged or have dialogue and debate. And those things in the past, having different points of view and discussing and debating them and trying to find, middle ground or solutions has been a key part of political life and how life works. And now it's like, we don't need to do that. We need to retreat to our corners and
it's a new tribalism,
our own behaviors. Yeah. I think, for me, that part of it aside, the amount of time that people are spending on social media in various forms is staggering. And, the amount of dollars that marketers are flowing through the Facebooks of the world is also staggering, because Facebook has the world's largest human database. They know everything about everyone on some level, really, if you boil it down. And if you're a marketer and you want to reach a certain type of customer, not males 35 to 54 with 100,000 income, but you want to reach a certain type of consumer, they give us unprecedented power. And, I'll use a quick example. As I said, when COVID shelter in place all started to happen, I realized that I had a huge opportunity. And I with all my travels, I wasn't super fit and kind of hanging on to a little weekend warrior activity. And I was like, look, I can really use this. So I got a little gym going in my backyard. I got my road bike out, and I've been really trying every day to kind of do some fitness and get in shape. And so, I go on YouTube and hey, what are some tips? Or I look up a video and, you know, I start sharing with my buddies about my rides and stuff. And so I send all those signals out into the digital world that I've become interested and passionate about fitness at this moment. And so if you were to look at my social feeds right now across Instagram and Facebook and others, 100% of my sponsored listings overnight went from wine and whatever other bullshit I was looking at before. And it's all fitness apparel, fitness tips, fitness companies. And if you think about that, like, that's amazing, because that's actually exactly what I care about at this moment. And I've given those signals that, you know, like if you're some upstart, you know, fitness apparel brand, or you're Nike for that matter, you don't want to like talk to every guy 25 to 50. You want to know that Mike is working out and into it right now. And
Mike's
so
looking for this. Mike wants to hear about this.
Yeah. And so I think that ability to really on a one-to-one level understand, you know, where people are at and what they're interested in and what's relevant to them has given us tremendous power. And so I think like the negatives sociologically, politically of social media, you know, I think we're going to have to work out, but the opportunity for marketers to take these signals where people are really expressing what's relevant to them, what they're passionate about, what their interests are, what their purchases are, you know, that gives us this amazing tool set as marketers.
Outstanding. This has been a fantastic discussion. I know we could keep going here. I think I'm going to turn to Steve here and see what questions are out there from the audience.
Yeah,
excellent.
There's a few that have come in as you guys have been chatting, so I've tried to group them a little bit, but thanks for doing this, guys. It's been great. What, Mike, one of the questions came in, what's the best example of an ad campaign that's really nailed it during COVID? If you have one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have not, to be honest, I have not been a great fan of all of these sort of anthemic, you know, we're thinking of you in this challenging time, sort of TV spots that I think a lot of brands tried to pivot to. I have equally questioned some brand activity and their words, you know, in the last week or two, given the sort of social justice crisis that we're also facing. I tend to look at brands that are doing things and you know, like an auto manufacturer coming out and saying like, you know, if you lose your job during COVID, you can return this car. And you know, creating something where you're actually really reflecting a clear understanding of what's happening and what it means to people, and trying to be there, trying to do something as a result of that. I have felt a little bit, I'm trying to think of like other great examples that, because I've talked about a bunch of them lately and I'm just blanking, but I think just like, I think that I guess what I would say, coming back to a little bit what we were just talking about, is I believe that from a marketing and brand building perspective, we're sort of moving past an era of words and emotions into an era of meaning and action and utility, because we can deliver that much more through digital tools. And I think some brands are still kind of trying to pull a page out of that old playbook of like, I want to make you feel good about my brand right now by saying nice words about the moment. And I just think that I think a lot of consumers just look past that these days.
Yeah, I agree. In a similar question to that one was, you know, you see with the Black Lives Matter stuff going on, seems every brand has started throwing up some sort of post or something to do with Black Lives Matter. Like, what do you tell your customers? What's the right move for them to do in that kind of a thing? Or is it best to do nothing? Or what kind of advice do you give brands for that?
It's a good question. It's an incredibly challenging moment for a lot of brands, because I think what we see is today's consumer, younger consumers, especially millennials, Gen Z, they care much more about what a brand stands for than consumers in the past, right? And they expect their employer to have a clear point of view. They expect brands to express their point of view, and they're going to decide this is aligned with my values or it's not, right? And I think that's why you see a brand like Nike say we're going to align with Colin Kaepernick. We're going to clearly express our values, knowing that that's not for everyone, but it's for most of their customers. And they know that if they don't do that, that the risk to their brand of consumers challenging them and asking them what they stand for would be greater. And I think that the data suggests that that's been very successful for Nike. But it's really challenging because Jordan's famous quote, "I don't want to deal in politics because Republicans buy sneakers too," right? Like, you, by definition, you sort of you have the potential to alienate part of your customer audience. Why would a brand want to take a stand knowing that like 29% of its customer base might walk out based on what you said? So it's really difficult. But I think brands feel at this moment that they have to be clear, that they have a responsibility. People look to businesses and brands to play a different role, I think, than they did 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so I think you have to be very thoughtful about it. Our advice to brands is to be careful and thoughtful about how you go about doing that. And again, I think you see brands in the last couple of weeks getting called out for sort of just making statements but not doing anything. And I think it comes back to that point for me of like, if you are going to take a stand, REI is a client of ours here in the US, and they closed their stores for Black Friday. And they said, we want people to get outside. We don't want people to be shopping. So on the biggest shopping day of the year, we're going to close our retailer. We're going to close our stores and say, go outside. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
That's making a statement.
Totally. A question popped in from Bragnolo on the call. It's relevant to this. He says, what marketing advice would you give the VPD or any police department during this time?
I don't know, man. These are tough questions. I think that I think like a lot of things in life, I guess it starts by listening. And I think what a lot of people would like to see or hope for from their police forces is being alive to the issues and listening to what people have to say. I look across, I don't know. I'm less current on Vancouver, current events. I would guess that it's less of a, police brutality and racism inherent in the police force and their actions. I would guess that that's less prevalent in Vancouver than certainly other places that we've seen in the US. But, I think this idea that an acknowledgement of the issue, a listening to people. And I think the more you can demonstrate that action and say, look, we get it, we're listening, we hear, we're looking for ways to improve and change. I think the police departments here and the places where they're running into more trouble is this sense of obstructionism, is this sense of like, no, like the way it is fine. A sense of a lack of empathy or listening to people right now. And so I don't know that I have a great marketing campaign idea for the Vancouver Police Department, but I guess if I was advising them, I would say, really actually listen and then show your constituents and stakeholders that you're listening and you're truly taking on board and you're alive to the issues. I think that's mostly what people want, that people are looking for right now. It's a tough one, though. It's a good one.
Well, here's an easier one for you. Where does online marketing go from here? What's around the corner in online marketing?
Yeah, I think that, here, I'll give you one thought. We've been kept away from physical interactions with brands and businesses a lot over the last few months. And I think, post-COVID, there are probably changes in behavior that we're going to see from consumers, like the idea of, you know, a woman rolling into the Nordstrom beauty counter and picking up a lipstick that 10 other women have tried on before her and just like, you know, putting that on, or, you know, that is unlikely to be happening anytime, you know, kind of going forward in some of those behaviors. I think if the more brands are continue to be limited in their physical interaction with people, I think some of the stuff that's been percolating for a while around augmented reality, virtual reality, you know, like my friend was telling me he got one of those fitness mirror things that you see on late night infomercials, but like these interactive technologies which begin to fill some of the gaps in what would have been physical a brand experience in the past, I think are likely to have a bit of a moment here. And some of that stuff that's been around for a while and has been a little bit slow, I think slower than we thought in getting traction, stuff like augmented reality, I see that accelerating as brands think about the importance of consumer experience and consumer interaction. But if we're spending so much more time in the digital world and we're also more limited in the physical world, or maybe you're a direct-to-consumer brand and you don't even have physical locations and retail, like how can you create digital experience through content and tools and technology that helps supplement or fill in for what we would have looked for more physical experience to do in the past? That would be my thought.
Awesome. This, I know we're running out of time here. This one's just a bunch of question marks, but it says like TikTok, question mark, good or bad, question mark, here to stay. Does Facebook buy them? Like, so what's your thoughts on TikTok?
I just need to call my daughter Madeline in here, and she'll tell you all about TikTok. She'll show you her 10 latest dances. And I mean, it's another one of these like phenomenon, you know, like you look at it initially and then it goes bananas and you're sort of shaking your head. But you know, I think it's here to stay. I think they've tapped into an interesting, different kind of vein with the music and dancing and some of the way that people are interacting with it. You know, like Snap hasn't gone away. Like Snapchat, I think, had more of a moment with younger generation. I feel this sense of that energy moving a little bit toward TikTok. You know, so I think things continue to ebb and flow, but I don't think it's going anywhere. They have yet to really figure out how to monetize and let brands get involved. You know, they've been really focused on scaling their audience and user base. So I think the next thing for TikTok is, you know, how do brands really play in TikTok? Instagram, as an example, you know, went in the same sort of vein, you know, pre and post Facebook acquisition, but you know, everyone's posting photos, sharing, and then I think they began to open up advertising opportunity, and brands have said like, this is a great place for discovery. This is a great place to use imagery and showcase, you know, fashion, beauty, different types of brands and products that benefit from that kind of like image-based interaction. And it's become a really powerful tool for some marketers and types of brands. And I think that'll be the question for TikTok. I think that user growth and usage is going to continue to go bananas, but then it'll be like, what's the business model? Like all of these guys have had to define.
Cool. I've got one more for you and then we can wrap it up. For small direct-to-consumer brand, what's the best way, do you think, to reach consumers?
Well, that's a pretty broad question. I think the thing I like about a lot of direct-to-consumer business opportunities and that sort of playbook, as I talked about before, is really hyper targeting, is really being super clear about who your product is for, and putting the data infrastructure in place to identify those customers and find them and get in front of them in the right channels. To me, like, even if you're, you know, Martin's type of business where you're more B2B probably than B2C, I still think like being really, you know, having the benefit of the data enabling you to, you know, find Mike at that moment when I'm into fitness, or to find that business leader at that moment when they're dealing with issues like contracts. I think the model is the common thread, I think, for all of the DTC type businesses is the data and really laser targeting as a result.
Cool. For both of you, Martin and Mike, thanks for doing this. If people wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that? Maybe Mike, for you first.
Yeah, I'd love to, hear from grads or students if I can help in any way. Best way to get me is mikeparker77@gmail.com.
Cool. How about Martin? Is there a good way, or website, or Twitter, email? What's preferred?
Email is probably the best way, though you can find me lots of other ways as well. My email is Martin Ertl, MartinErtl@gmail.com. And like Mike, love to chat with VC grads and students, and happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both for doing this. I really appreciate it. If anybody on the call has ideas for who else we should have on this, that would be, just let me know. That would be great. We do have one scheduled for next week. We've got Dax De Silva, grad of 94, I believe. He's the CEO and founder of Lightspeed, which is a publicly traded tech company on the TSX. He's based out of Montreal. So Dax will be on next Wednesday. So hopefully you guys all come back again. But Mike and Martin, thank you both very much. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody else for attending. Have a good night.
My pleasure, Stephen. Thank you for organizing, and thank you for looking for ways to keep the alumni community connected. Good on you.
No problem.
A big thanks to both of you. This has been fantastic.
Good night, all.
Good night.